hello there. Sorry, I didn't know we were starting. Welcome to the entire Old Testament in 6 minutes or less. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started. In the beginning, of course, God creates the heavens and the earth. Everybody's read that far, right, in Genesis? Well, shortly thereafter, God creates the first human beings, Adam and Eve, and they waste no time in rebelling against their Creator and being selfish and doing what they want to do. They mess things up, and it goes downhill from there. Shortly thereafter, Genesis 6 says that God is grieved that he made human beings in the first place, and so he's going to start all over. And that's where we get the great, sweet little children's story about the flood that killed everybody, except for Noah and his family and some pairs of animals. So we start all over again, and the earth populates, and eventually God picks a special man named Abraham to be the father of a new nation, his chosen people. He's going to give these people land, promised land. He's going to bless them. There's going to be lots of descendants, and they're going to be a blessing to the rest of the world. So Abraham starts his family, and he has a son named Isaac, and he has a son named Jacob, and Jacob has a bunch of sons, including Joseph, the guy with the coat, and eventually they end up in Egypt because of a famine. And in Egypt, they're taken as slaves. And that's where Moses is called onto the scene. Everybody knows how Moses comes and says, "Let my people go," to Pharaoh. And eventually they escape from Pharaoh in that miraculous act where Moses parts the Red Sea and they go through to the other side. Well, they're in the wilderness. They don't know what they're doing. They need laws. They need regulations. And that's where God gives Moses the 10 Commandments. See that little piece missing there? Well, looky here at this. I just happened to have a piece that was broken off of the 10 Commandments. Where did I get this, you ask? Well, I saw this mail order place for 3 easy payments of $99. I could get an authentic piece. I have a certificate to prove it. So, unbelievable. Right here in Northern Virginia, a piece of the 10 Commandments. Okay, they got the 10 Commandments. There's actually a lot more commandments than that. And a lot of the commandments deal with sacrifices. They sacrificed animals back then. They killed them to atone for their sins. This will become important when the New Testament comes along. But it was not a good time to be a sheep. Anyway, eventually they move into the Promised Land. They come up from Egypt, and a military leader named Joshua leads a 3-pronged attack, which takes them into the Promised Land, and they're able to settle there. Well, they've got good times and bad times, good times and bad times. It's good times if they're following God, things go well, but when they sin and rebel, things usually go bad, and then they cry out for God's deliverance. This happened over and over and over in those early days. Just remember after 9/11, churches were packed for a week or two, and then a couple weeks later, people stopped going again. Same sort of thing. All right, well, eventually the Israelites wanted a king. And the first one was King Saul. He gets a failing grade on our pass-fail report card here. He was a big, tall, handsome, studly guy, but miserable failure. Next king God picked, and he was a great one. David, yes, the guy who beat Goliath, who played the harp. He was a great king, a man after God's own heart. And then his son Solomon was supposed to be the wisest man who ever lived, but he quickly blew it. He was a mess. He had like 80,000 wives and worshipped idols, and after that, whole kingdom went to pot. David had really built up Israel into this great kingdom. Jerusalem became the center of power. Solomon built this huge temple. They were at the glory days. But after Solomon died, everything broke up. It broke into 2 kingdoms, Israel in the north, Judah in the south. Eventually the Assyrians take over Israel. Eventually the Babylonians came and wipe out Judah and take the best and the brightest into exile in Babylon. They eventually come back, but Israel never regains its glory days. At the time of Jesus, of course, it was the Romans who controlled this area. Now, during this time of all these kings, before they were taken into captivity, there's lots of prophets on the scene, God's prophets who warn the people, who tell them to repent, who predict the future. A lot of the Old Testament is their writings. You'll also find 5 wisdom books in the Old Testament. You'll know some of them very well. Psalms, Proverbs, Job, 2 other ones, and those are sandwiched in there and are great reading. So that is the Old Testament in a nutshell. In short, we have people who are created in God's image, but who reject their purpose, who rebel against God, who do what they want to do. But God never gives up on his people, and we're really going to see that more than ever when we get to the New Testament. Happy Easter, everybody.